Hey there, Kipsters. We're looking at objectives 2A.1 or objective 2A.1, decimal operations. That's focusing on adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing decimals. You can see this is part of standard 7 NS 1.2, which is a key standard for the CST. We're going to start by looking at how you add or subtract decimals, quickly reviewing those two things before I ask you to try. In order to find the sum or difference when you have a decimal, the very first step is to just line up the decimals. So if I'm looking at A here, I see 0 and 92 thousandths plus 2 and 7 tenths. I'll add them by lining up the decimal first. So 2.7 and below it 0.092. The first step I did, which was line them up. Second step is to add zeros if you need them. And if you look at this, you can see that we're going to have to fill in some spaces here with a 0 and a 0. And now we should be ready to add them. If you add them, 0 plus 2 is 2, 0 plus 9 is 9, 7 plus 0 is 7, and 2 plus 0 is 2. The last step is to, for addition or subtraction, just bring down the decimal. So the answer here would be 2 and 792 thousandths. The steps for subtraction are exactly the same. So if I were going to subtract 16 and 402 thousandths minus 5 and 39 hundredths, I'll do this in blue. The first step is to line them up. So that's 16.402 minus 5.39. You can see my decimals are lined up. Step 1 is done. Step 2 is to add zeros. There's one place I'll need to add a 0, which is right here. Step 2 is done. And the last step is to subtract and then bring down the decimal. So I'll go ahead and subtract. 2 minus 0 is 2. 0 minus 9 I need to borrow, this is 3. 10 minus 9 is 1. 3 minus 3 is 0. 6 minus 5 is 1. And 1 minus nothing is 1. And my last step to bring down the decimal, which would make it 11 and 12 thousandths. So the steps for addition and subtraction are very similar. You line up the decimal, add the zeros, then after you subtract or add, bring down the decimal. I'd like you to stop the video here, and please try C and D. Press play after you've tried them. Okay, you tried those yourself, so now it's time to check. If you add these two together, the very first thing you should have done is lined up the decimals. So it's really 0.495 plus 0.95, and you're adding. Second step is to add zeros if you need them, which is right here. Third step is to add. 5 plus 0 is 5, 4 plus 5 is 9, 9 plus 9 is 18, 4 plus 0 is 0, is 4, plus 1 is 5. And then last step is to bring down the decimal, which should go right here. Your answer should have been 5 and 895 thousandths. Second one, which you tried, was 9.5 minus 2.49. First step is to line up the decimals. Second step is to add a 0 if you need it, which goes right there. And third step is to subtract and bring down the decimal after you're done. 0 minus 9 you need to borrow. 10 minus 9 is 1. 4 minus 4 is 0. 9 minus 2 is 7. Bring down the decimal, you should have had 7 and 100 though. If you got those right, you're ready to move on to the next skill. Our next part, slide 2, is about multiplying decimals. So whenever you're multiplying decimals, the very first step is to multiply. We're going to ignore the fact that they're decimals and just multiply as our first step. So I'll try example A. That's really 2 and 25 hundredths times, and here you see it won't matter that I line up my decimals, times 1 and 652 thousandths. My decimals are not lined up here because I'm just pretty much ignoring the fact that they have decimals, and I'm just going to multiply. I will now multiply 2 times 5 is 10. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. 2 times 2 is 4. Skip a spot. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. Skip 2 spots. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 3 is 15. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 1 is 13. Whoops. And then I skip 3 spots. 1, 2, 3. And I multiply. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 2 is 2. And then I add them all up. If I add them all up, this is 0. 5 plus 5 is 10. 4 plus 1 is 5. 6, 7, 7. 5, 5, 1 is 11. 3, 5, 6, 7. And 2 plus 1 is 3. So I have 3, 7, 1, 7, 0, 0. The very first step was to multiply. That step is now done. The second step is to move the decimal, the number of spaces you moved it in the factors. So, in this example, in green you see I moved my decimal 1, 2 places in that factor, 1, 2, 3 places in that factor. So in total, I'll need to move my decimal 5 places in my product. So if I move my decimal 5 places, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, my final answer, which I'll write, is 3.717. And honestly, I don't care about these 2 decimals after the 0. So my final answer is 3 and 717 thousandths. I'd like you to stop the video here and try yourself. Your first example is 0.5 times 3 and 15 hundredths. And the second one I'm going to try to bring down so you can see it. Stop the video here. Press play when you're ready to check your answer. Okay, you tried them, so now it's time to check your answer. If you multiplied 0.5 times 3 and 15 hundredths, your first step is to multiply, not needing to worry about where the decimals are lined up. So you can see my decimals are not lined up here. I multiply 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. 5 times 3 is 15. I can just ignore multiplying by 0. So I've already multiplied. The second step is to move the decimal the same number of spaces as the factors. I moved it 2 spaces in this factor, 1 space in this factor. So in total I need to move it 3 spaces in my product. So the answer will be 1 and 575 thousandths. Give yourself a check if you got it right. Next, 0.29 times 6.457. First step is to multiply. Hopefully I don't run out of space. 9 times 7 is 63. 9 times 5 is 45. Plus 6 is 51. 9 times 4 is 36. Plus 5 is 41. 6 times 9 is 54. Plus 8 is 58. Skip 1 spot. 2 times 7 is 14. 2 times 5 is 10, plus 1 is 11. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. And 2 times 6 is 12. Add those together, and I'll bring the sum here. That would be 3 plus 0 is 3. 4 plus 1 is 5. 1 plus 1 is 2. 9 plus 8 is 17. 5, 6, 7, 8. And then your last one's there. Second step is to move the factor the same number of spaces. You moved it 3 here, 2 here. So you should have moved it 5 in your product. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Your final answer should have been 1 and 87,253 100,000ths. Give yourself a check if you got that right. Now you're ready to move on to the last step, which is division of decimals. For these, we're going to find the quotient, which means we're dividing.